Hello, welcome to the MILELE readings. I'm Jennies Edwards. We are on chapter 27. Let's recap chapter 26. In chapter 26, we entered the dome for the first time. We've only seen it from the outside, but we entered it because Lucas is there fighting for his life and with no apparent improvement. And this seems to be the end. And so Boa and Cree are there visiting him, and Cree reveals something that Vohan Batten was the one that had told Lucas that he didn't have to worry about, the cure, Prince Adani's cure at his age. He could leave it. He didn't have to worry about it for now. And of course, Cree is really distraught about this, though Agios does visit. So we'll see in following chapters what happens then for Lucas. It's also revealed to us there that, as I mentioned before, I believe that the effect of the toxin is seen more readily on Eden 2 than the rest of the world. Everything's sort of more speeded up there. Also, we witness the tender moment between Cree and Agios. Oh, it's lovely to see that with the young ones. Ruth, of course, is impatient with Hope's lethargic attitude and despondency because she is just not recovering, even though she's supposedly well. But it seemed more it was psychological, spiritual, perhaps. So it's hard for her. In any case, Hope has an unusual visitor. And I think that's made a difference for her. If you remember that unusual visitor, Raphael, the one that the sovereign emperor had told Gabriel to pass a message to. Well, supposedly this was it. Okay, and there was also more mention of the lamb and lion pendants, that they were gifts from Prince Adani to the twins when they were babies, to Nathan and Hope. All right, I think that pretty much covers what I needed to sum up. Yep. So let's go to chapter 27. And we are back in Sicily. Nathan stood leaning against an elaborate post on the third-floor balcony of his temporary home. It was a grand seaside house with arched doorways, a myriad of echoing halls, and over 24 rooms. He could become lost in such a house. As a fugitive, he had expected he wouldn't have the same world-class accommodations he'd become accustomed to as executive assistant to the world envoy. And he'd become used to roughing it during their time on the run. This was an unexpected treat. Their hosts, a married couple with 3 young adult children, kept about their daily lives as if he and Faith were not present. Faith was allowed timely visits on the main floor. Being incognito wasn't as crucial for her, as she'd come under the guise of the host family's distant relative. He, however, soon discovered that he couldn't move about quite as freely. After being confined to the top floor for 2 days, he'd tried to explore below. He'd barely reached the ground floor when the no-nonsense housekeeper had frantically waved him back up. No, sir, you must stay up," she'd protested in a hushed voice with a strong accent he couldn't decipher as being Sicilian or Italian. The lady of the house, a past socialite turned underground Israeli loyal supporter, had appeared, and the urgent look in her eyes had sent him scurrying back up without a word. He was later told that at the moment of his attempted excursion, Council of Nations patrol had been invited in for tea, a practice the family kept in order to keep their friends close and their enemies closer. Faith had given him a good tongue lashing afterwards. "Are you sure you can't be seen there?" Nathan turned at the sound of Faith's voice. "The mist might be thinning, but it's still significant," he assured her. Indeed, the mid-afternoon sun penetrated the gloom just a little more effectively than even the day before. Faith eyed him suspiciously before moving closer. She had 2 mugs. She held one out to him. "A peace offering?" He hoped his tone was casual, but he felt anything but. Faith was very beautiful in a softly printed wraparound dress with pale hues of apricot and green. The clothing their host family had provided were of excellent quality and very comfortable, as was their accommodation. "It's very important that you stick to the rules, Nathan," Faith said after he'd taken the cup. "You asked again to go out as if you don't remember what happened 2 days ago." She sipped from her cup, still looking at him. Nathan looked out at the bleak scene as he sipped his own coffee. The strong smell and taste reminded him of times before the mist. Early morning coffees with Keiko Bays, when he'd just started out as Keiko's junior assistant. Those days, Keiko had mainly focused on his career as majority owner and CEO of the largest investment firm in the world, with all its holdings in retail, real estate, energy, technology, and more. Even back then, his power was such that if he sneezed, the world would catch a cold. It wasn't long after that Keiko let go of his original assistant and secured Nathan in the position. They'd worked well together. Keiko had been appreciative and encouraging, proud that he had nabbed the star graduate of both Harvard and Oxford from a top, well-renowned law firm where Nathan had been employed. Nathan had, at the time, somewhat of a hero worship for a man so young with so much power. Then Mendax Nabuan came into the picture and everything changed almost overnight. Nathan looked at Faith. Her eyes had a faraway look. Her hair stirred gently around her cheeks. She'd also caused his life to change overnight. "After being cooped up in the ship, it's hard to stay still here, especially with you." She looked at him. "What do you mean?" He decided to bite the bullet. "I've fallen for you. You know that. You, on the other hand, do everything in your power to remind me of how impossible you and I are." A smile touched her lips. Impatiently, she brushed aside a curly strand of hair. "That's right. There is no place for you and I in this world. We both have our worlds, and there is no meeting between the two." "Who says?" he challenged. He set his mug on the balcony's edge. She cupped hers with both hands. "You will return to Eden too. Your sister's well-being is imperative, which is directly affected by yours. Also, we need your continued cooperation. You're a very important advisor to the underground Israeli loyals. We've already gained a lot from you that will aid us in the future." "And you?" She looked down, contemplating. "After delivering you to Eden too, I will join my cousin and continue preparing the world for the return of Prince Adani. For obvious reasons, I cannot return to Israel." "I won't let you leave Eden too." "I won't leave the ship," Faith said. Nathan sighed, feeling exasperated. He tried again. "Have we not become closer since our travels and the 4 days here?" She turned away from him, her back against the rail. "Feelings cannot come into play." "Why not?" he asked. She frowned at him. "Nathan, surely you understand the risks, the tasks." Then take those risks on Eden too. No, she said. Frustrated, he grabbed the upper rail close to her. You're so stubborn and irresponsible. How so? Her eyes were masked with confusion. I'm committed to doing my job well. Nathan grimaced. You started this whole thing back at the Israeli hotel. He looked into her eyes, willing her to know his heart. Her eyes widened. That was a front. You know that very well. It was role-playing in order to transfer you out. With one hand still gripping the rail, he leaned closer to her, no longer caring about concealing himself. I don't care what it was. I know you're well aware of the result, and you should take responsibility. You knew at the onset it was all fake. There's no responsibility to be taken. Her jaw set stubbornly. He frowned and clenched his teeth, unwilling to concede. She took a step back from him, then her face softened. But there is something I can do for you. What? He asked. We've decided it's safe enough to take you out. We'll go for a walk after dusk. Well, they're still at odds, people. All right. Eden 2. Gideon felt like a third wheel following Agent Mike and Gabriel around the island. They'd spend most of the day hiking along the outskirts of the island, along the fishing docks, the ship's port, then driving from Agri 1 all the way around to Agri 6 past the waterfall. They'd stopped just short of the mist patch. Now the sun was setting and the two still seemed energetic. They could be speaking Greek for all he knew, since much of what they discussed went over his head. But his purpose was not to understand. He was simply to be Governor Peter and Colonel Davenport's eyes and ears. Eventually to report on all that transpired since Gabriel's appearance on the island. Gabriel had simply asked for a tour around the island. Had it not been obvious that he was an agent of Prince Adani, the free roam of the island would not have been permitted. They certainly drew enough attention with their almost identical look and striking appearance. They wore an air of authority that was hard to ignore. Most people stayed out of their way as if realizing that something important was transpiring. With the Council of Nations forces still upon the waters, Eden 2 dwellers were eager for allies, especially those connected to Agios. After hearing the word bridge repeatedly, Gideon asked, What do you mean by bridges to Eden 2 and 4 corners of the earth? Both men paused and turned to look at him. At their look, an unexplained tremor coursed through him. He laughed nervously. Just seems a little strange. After all, you also spoke of fortifying the island against intruders. He shrugged. So why would you have bridges? His question petered out. Gabriel nodded as if understanding the dilemma. Yes, the island will become impenetrable once Nathaniel Kanisa arrives. The bridges. He looked at Agent Mike as if uncertain if he should proceed. Agent Mike nodded. Turning back to Gideon, Gabriel said, The bridges will appear at the beginning of the end. New scene. A couple of hours later, in his room above the airplane hangar, Gideon was still mulling over the phrase, at the beginning of the end. They hadn't really explained what it meant, but instinctively he knew it wasn't theirs to explain. He guessed he would understand when it happened. He lay back against a well-flattened pillow and straddled one leg atop his bent knee. The firm mattress beneath him was a welcome relief. The lengthy hike with the two men had tired him out. Considering himself very fit, he wondered how they'd shown no sign of fatigue. A sound outside his room door had him sitting up. Agent Mike? Come in, he yelled. Maybe not Agent Mike. He wouldn't have knocked. The door opened and Captain Nick appeared, still in uniform. Sir, Gideon said, standing. At ease. Captain Nick entered slowly, looking around. I see they're not here. Knowing immediately who he meant, Gideon said, After meeting with Agios, they went into the patch. I couldn't follow them there. He plopped down on the side of the bed. The patch? They went there too? With no suit, but Mike said his fellow comrade would not be returning. And Mike? Gideon grinned. He'll be back. Apparently, he's here for the duration. New scene. The watcher kept himself out of sight behind one of the large tents outside the mist patch. What was happening? Even though their true forms were cloaked, he could tell the two men who had just disappeared into the mist patch with the other were bright ones. He was nervous. How many would he have to avoid? Being on an island full of people with the other's essence was horrible enough, not to mention the radiant bright one that had appeared in the hub. Even though his time on Eden 2 was soon coming to an end, he could barely handle one more day. And the island princess, she was well again with the essence glowing in her. The world called it Eden 2 DNA, but it was so much more. He shuddered. Why are you afraid, you imbecile? The watcher jumped, frightened by the sudden surge of words into his mind. Prepare yourself for what's coming. I will get that woman no matter what. I will snatch her from his hand. The watcher skulked from his hiding place on unsteady legs. Wiping beads of sweat from his forehead, he headed to his travel cart. Why should they inherit everything that should be mine? Who is he to be called the son? I am the one. I have been cheated. It should be me. The words ricocheted throughout the watcher's head. Both hands covered his ears as he stumbled along, but he could not block the words. Captain Nick, with arms folded, new scene. Captain Nick, with arms folded, sitting on a metal chair at Gideon's kitchen table, stared intently at Gideon. You mean to say what we suspected about Agent Mike is true? He really is Agios' agent. Gideon nodded. More precisely, the Sovereign Emperor's. He was sitting across the table from Captain Nick where, after leaving Gideon's bedroom, they'd been in relaxed conversation for the past half hour. And the other one, Gabriel? Same, Gideon said. Wow. Captain Nick stared at the ceiling for a moment. So stuff's happening. Gideon whistled softly, then laughed. Ever since the Silver Plains, I figured things were changing. They'll be in a big meeting tomorrow with Governor Peter and the Colonel. Captain Nick unfolded his arms and placed his hands on the table. He leaned forward. What else do you know? Gideon answered. Boa Sadiq will be in charge. Agios gave him a message for everybody. Eden 2 will become closed off from the world. Fortified was the word used. There's a big end coming, that is, how do I say it? They said the beginning of the end. Don't ask me what that means, but loyals around the world will somehow be spared or saved or something. New scene. Why didn't you heal me? Why the redhead in green? Hope persisted, not caring that her tone was whiny. Agios' gentle smile only served to annoy her more. Agios, I suffered for days when you could have ended it. Dear one, suffering often accomplishes what nothing else will. You are made to understand your lack, your need, and your dependence on us. Hope leaned back, resting her hands on the ground behind her. She hadn't been to the high point in many days, and now that she was there with Agios, she was determined to have answers. Well, yes, I know all about suffering producing good qualities. She looked toward the ocean. The Council of Nations fleet looked like toys on the water. Vexation rose. She looked at Agios. I've read about it enough in the truth tome, she said irreverently. She immediately regretted her tone, and the regret chased away the vexation. I'm sorry, Agios. She dusted off her hands, then rested them against her crossed legs. Why do you allow them to remain there? Everyone is anxious and cross, and I know your warriors in the Silver Plains, could come and chase them away. Raphael came to you so you would understand that sovereign emperor's ways are not limited to just what you comprehend, Agios said, finally answering her original question. Then he answered her second question. He has a timing for everything. He's not limited to the scope of this world and cannot be boxed into your imagination. So what will he have me do then? He will have you speak his truth. I spoke his truth to you when I first brought you here, even though you were broken and weak. Yes, and you nourished and cared for me until I was well, all the while filling me with truth. When you were brought back to your former home, you continued to live and speak that truth. Upon returning here, you still spoke the truth. Then you became busy with your work and lazy in speaking the truth. Lazy? Yes, there are many under the mist who are proclaiming that truth, preparing the people of the world for the return of Prince Adani. Here, you and Boa must remind everyone of that truth and of his coming. But are we not already prepared? Agios stared into the distance. Was he looking for the Sky Kingdom? Since the mist, it had not been visible to the naked eye. A new era demands a new readiness, he told her. Not all who claim to be loyal to Prince Adani will be ready, dear one. Hope digested his words. But why me? Why do I have to be the one? You are the bride, the embodiment of all those who are sovereign emperor's beloved, who will inherit the Sky Kingdom with sovereign Prince Adani. You are the light and the salt that the world needs to continue dispelling the darkness and enrich the world with truth. That's the end of chapter 27. Please join me next time for chapter 28. We will go to Sicily again. Take care.